The evening was cold and quiet. Anthony knelt alone by a simple grave, his tiny fingers tracing the faded name on the stone. Tears ran down Anthony's cheeks, soaking the collar of his worn-out shirt. The cemetery around him was dark, filled only with shadows and whispers from the wind. "Mama," he sobbed softly, his voice breaking. "Why did you leave me?" The moon above shone gently on him, as if the sky itself felt his sadness. At just 10 years old, Anthony's heart was already heavy with more pain than most grown-ups could bear. But how did a little boy, the son of one of the richest men in town, end up crying alone in a graveyard? It all began in a bustling town, full of honking cars, busy markets, and houses bigger than dreams. Anthony was born into a wealthy family. His father was a powerful man with many servants. At first, life was sweet. He lived in a house with tall gates and a fountain that danced in the sunlight. But all that changed when Anthony's mother, his sweet, gentle mother, fell ill. The doctors said it was cancer. Anthony didn't understand big words like that. He just knew that the woman who hugged him the tightest and sang to him at bedtime was getting weaker every day. One afternoon, when Anthony brought her a cup of water, she smiled faintly and whispered, "I love you, my son." That was the last time he heard her voice. The house grew cold after she was gone. The walls that once echoed with laughter now stood silent and sad. Just 1 year later, Anthony's father remarried. The new wife, Madame Janet, was beautiful on the outside but cold on the inside. She smiled with her mouth, but not with her eyes. She brought her own 2 daughters into the big house, and from the very first day, Anthony could feel it. The house was no longer his home. At dinner time, Madame Janet's daughters sat at the big dining table, laughing and eating fancy meals. Anthony sat alone on the cold floor with a small plate in his lap. "He's just a boy," Madame Janet would say with a fake laugh. "He doesn't need much." But her real thoughts were darker. She feared Anthony. Feared that one day he would inherit everything her daughters wanted. Feared that he would grow into a strong man she could not control. So she began whispering poison into his father's ears. "He's bad luck," she said. "He's cursed. He's the reason your first wife died." And somehow, heartbreakingly, Anthony's father believed her. He sent Anthony away from the fancy private schools to a crumbling public school where the windows had no glass, and the teachers often didn't show up. Anthony's beautiful clothes were packed away. He now wore faded uniforms and shoes with talking sawls. At home, things got worse. Madame Janet treated Anthony like a servant. He cleaned floors, fetched water, and carried groceries while her daughters painted their nails and laughed. Anthony missed his mother. More than anything. Every time Madame Janet shouted at him or slapped his hand away from the dining table, Anthony wished he could run to her warm hug, to her soothing voice. But she was gone. And so, whenever the sadness became too much, Anthony would sneak out of the house late at night. He would walk, barefoot and shivering, down the lonely streets to the cemetery. There, kneeling by his mother's grave, he would pour out his little heart. "Mama, they hate me now. Mama, I'm trying to be good. Mama, please come back." But the only answer was the cold breeze that rustled the dry leaves around him. Anthony cried until he had no more tears left. And then he would wipe his face with his sleeve, stand up, and walk back to the house that no longer felt like home. Even though Anthony's young life was full of pain, he did not give up. No, he held on tightly to the dream his mother once told him about, the dream of becoming someone great. After many hard years, after the shouting, the beatings, and the lonely nights by his mother's grave, Anthony finished secondary school. His heart beat fast with joy the day he got a letter in the mail. It had big bold letters on it. "Congratulations. You have been admitted to the University of Calabar to study radiography." Anthony hugged the letter tightly against his chest and cried. But this time, they were happy tears. But the road was still not easy. His father, still trapped under Madame Janet's spell, refused to help him with money for school. Anthony, the son of a rich man, had to wash cars, carry heavy loads, and clean shops just to pay his school fees. While other students wore fancy clothes and drove shiny cars, Anthony wore the same shirt over and over again until the colors faded. At night, when he was too tired to even keep his eyes open, Anthony would sit under a broken street lamp with his old textbooks, studying until the mosquitoes made him slap at his legs. The hunger, the pain, the cold, Anthony fought through them all. And guess what? He did not just pass. He became one of the best students in the whole university. When he graduated, he wore the brightest smile anyone had ever seen. He walked across the stage in his graduation gown, head held high, and the big loudspeaker announced, "First-class honors in radiography, Anthony Ocone." The whole crowd clapped and cheered. But somewhere deep inside, Anthony wished his real mother could have been there to see it. After that, Anthony went for NYSC, a special service for young graduates in Nigeria, and worked very hard during his internship in Lagos. Lagos was a wild, noisy city full of cars and shouting and bright lights. Anthony did not know anyone there. He slept in tiny rooms with leaking roofs, and sometimes he ate only once a day. But he never stopped smiling, because he knew he was close to the life he had always dreamed about. Then one beautiful Sunday morning, everything changed. Anthony met Miriam. She was like a princess from a fairy tale, tall, graceful, with beautiful dark skin and hair so long it touched her waist. Her smile lit up the whole room. Miriam was a Muslim girl from a powerful family. Her father was a sitting senator, a man whose name made people step aside in fear and respect. At first, Anthony could not believe it. How could someone so beautiful, someone from such a big family, even notice him? But Miriam did. She saw his kind heart. She saw his strength. Slowly, gently, they fell in love. They would take long walks in the evening, talking about their dreams and laughing at silly jokes. Miriam would brush his hair with her fingers and say, "You are the bravest man I know." Soon, the wedding bells rang. Their wedding was like something out of a dream. Big, colorful tents, golden chairs, music, laughter. Politicians, senators, and even governors filled the halls. The wedding was held in Kaduna, a beautiful city with wide open skies and red dusty roads. Anthony wore a sparkling white agbada, and Miriam looked like a queen in her flowing lace gown. People clapped. People danced. People threw money into the air until it rained naira notes. But not everyone was happy. Far away, Madame Janet, the woman who had hated Anthony since he was a boy, boiled with anger. Her heart was full of jealousy and rage. "How dare he be happy?" she hissed. "How dare he succeed when my daughters are still struggling?" And so, in the dark of night, she went to a wicked herbalist, a man with charms and potions made for evil. She begged him to destroy Anthony's life, to make him sick, to make him die young. The herbalist gave her strange powders and evil instructions. Madame Janet followed them carefully. She did everything, burning candles, chanting wicked words, even burying charms where Anthony once walked. But what she did not know was that Anthony was not alone. His mother's spirit was watching. Even though her body was gone, her love was still strong, stronger than any evil magic. Each time Madame Janet sent a wicked spirit after Anthony, it would be stopped at the gate. It would turn back, afraid, because Anthony's mother's spirit stood guard like a fierce lioness, protecting her only son. Madame Janet tried and tried, but Anthony's star only shone brighter. Meanwhile, back at home, Anthony's father, the man who once loved power more than his own blood, fell terribly sick. The doctor said it was prostate cancer. He became weak, helpless, lying on a big hospital bed with tubes in his arms and machines beeping beside him. The man who once walked tall with bodyguards now needed help just to sit up. Anthony heard the news. He sat quietly for a long time, staring at the wall. This was the father who had once sent him away. The father who had believed the lies of a wicked woman. What would Anthony do now? One quiet evening, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, a message came from Anthony's old home. It was from his father. "Come home, my son," the message said. "I need to see you before it's too late." At first, Anthony sat still, the phone shaking in his hand. The memories of pain, of nights sleeping hungry, of eating on the floor while others sat at the table, they all rushed back into his mind. But then, he remembered his mother's words. "Forgive even when it hurts," she used to say. So Anthony packed a small bag and boarded. Flight from Lagos to his hometown. The journey was long, and his heart beat fast all the way. What would he find at home? When he finally reached the house, the big mansion that had never truly felt like home, he saw his father sitting outside under a tree. The once strong man now looked small, thin, and tired. Their eyes met. For a long time, no words came out. Only the wind spoke, whistling softly through the dry leaves. Then, with a shaky voice, his father called out, "Anthony, my son." Tears filled Anthony's eyes. Slowly, he walked closer. And right there, under the evening sky, his father broke down. "Forgive me, Anthony," he wept. "Forgive me for all the pain I caused you. I was blind. I listened to lies. I forgot how much your mother loved you. I forgot how much you deserved better." Anthony stood there, feeling the heavy load he had carried for years start to lift off his shoulders. He knelt beside his father, took his weak hands into his own, and whispered, "I forgive you, Papa." They both cried, two broken hearts trying to heal. After they wiped their tears, Anthony smiled gently and said, "Papa, I have something to tell you." His father looked up, his old eyes full of hope. Anthony reached into his bag and pulled out a small blue envelope. Inside was a big white paper, his professional license. "I have gotten my license to work as a radiographer in Australia," Anthony announced, his voice full of pride. His father gasped, holding the paper with shaky hands. "Australia?" he whispered, almost like he was afraid to believe it. "Yes, Papa," Anthony said. "I will be flying soon. A big hospital there wants me to join them. They say they have never seen a young man so brilliant." For the first time in many years, Anthony's father smiled, a real, full smile that reached his eyes. Inside the house, hidden behind a curtain, Madame Janet listened. Her heart boiled with anger. "How can he succeed when my own daughters are failures?" she muttered. Anthony's stepsisters, the ones she had once praised so highly, had dropped out of school. They spent their days running wild, chasing rich men, throwing parties, and causing shame to the family name. Madame Janet's dreams of her daughters inheriting all the wealth had crashed like a house made of sand. And now, Anthony was about to fly out of the country, to a place she could never reach him. No, she would not let it happen. That night, she cooked a big pot of stew, thick and rich with the smell of fresh pepper and spices. But hidden inside the food was a deadly poison. She planned to serve it to Anthony and his father. "Let them both die together," she thought, her eyes dark with wickedness. "Then, everything will be mine." She smiled sweetly as she set the table. She even called Anthony and his father to come and eat, pretending to be kind and loving. Anthony, tired from the journey, almost sat down. His father, weak and trusting, moved toward the table too. But just before they could touch the food, a strong wind blew into the room. The lights flickered. The picture of Anthony's mother, the one that hung on the wall, fell down with a loud crash. Everyone jumped. The glass shattered all over the floor. Anthony's heart raced. He looked at the fallen picture, then at the food. And something deep inside him, something he couldn't explain, told him, "Don't eat." He looked into Madame Janet's eyes and saw a flash of fear there, a fear she quickly tried to hide. Anthony stood up slowly. He reached for his father's hand. "Papa, let's go outside. I want to tell you something," he said, forcing a smile. His father nodded, and together they walked out into the cool night air. Madame Janet sat frozen at the table, her evil plan ruined, at least for now. As Anthony and his father sat outside under the soft moonlight, trying to catch their breath, inside the house, Madame Janet was busy. She had stepped out of the kitchen for a moment to make a phone call. She whispered quickly into the phone, "Everything is ready. After tonight, Anthony will be no more." Her voice was sharp and full of evil. When she came back into the kitchen, she picked up the big pot of soup. She smiled, stirring it carefully with a long silver spoon. She stirred and stirred, making sure the deadly poison spread deep into every part of the soup. Then, without thinking, she lifted the spoon to her mouth to taste it, just a little. She forgot. She forgot the poison was in there. The moment the soup touched her tongue, her face changed. Her eyes grew wide. She dropped the spoon with a loud clatter. Suddenly, she grabbed her stomach with both hands and let out a loud scream. "Ah!" she cried, falling to the ground. Anthony, hearing the noise, rushed into the kitchen. What he saw made him freeze. His stepmother was lying on the cold floor, twisting and turning, her face twisted in pain. "Help! Help me!" she cried weakly, reaching out her hand. Anthony didn't know what to do. He wanted to help, because deep down he was not like her. He knelt beside her, trying to help her sit up. Her breathing was heavy, her skin turning pale. With the last strength left in her body, Madame Janet grabbed Anthony's shirt and pulled him closer. Her voice was just a whisper now. I poisoned the soup," she said, gasping for air. "I wanted you and your father dead. Please forgive me." Tears rolled down Anthony's face. How could someone hate him so much? He looked into her eyes once full of pride and wickedness, now full of fear and regret. Before he could say anything, Madame Janet gave one last breath and went still. She was gone. The kitchen grew silent. The wind outside howled softly, like it was morning. Anthony sat there for a long time, staring at the woman who had caused him so much pain. A woman who could have been family, but chose to be an enemy. His father soon came into the kitchen, leaning on a cane. When he saw her lifeless body, he bowed his head and whispered sadly, "The evil that men do really lives with them." Anthony nodded quietly. He wiped his tears, helped his father to sit, and they both sat there for a while, two survivors of a long, hard battle. That night, Anthony made a decision in his heart. He would leave the pain behind. He would fly to Australia, not just to work, but to live, to truly live, in honor of his mother, who had loved him dearly. He would build a new life, full of kindness, love, and hope. Because no matter how dark the world became, Anthony knew one truth. Goodness always wins in the end, and the evil that men do live with them.